I don't know what. So this starts a little early. Hopefully people will show up, and hopefully it doesn't suck. And hopefully this doesn't like cut in and out. So this starts a little early. Hopefully people will show up, and hopefully it doesn't suck. And hopefully this doesn't like cut in and out. They're patiently waiting. Okay. I don't know what that does. 20. All right. Juana, it's 8:30. I see some of you are here. I'm not just going to sit and talk. So there is a questions piece here. You can either send me questions through it. Hopefully it shows up for you guys, or ask questions through Twitter. I have that up, or I can put it on. You can put it on the YouTube comments. But I'm not just going to kind of sit. Or I can do that, but I prefer not to just sit and ramble about Unit 4. Just because I don't know what all I would say that's different than what's on the website. But who knows if any of you are actually paying attention. Yes, I know. That was very lovely. Thank you for putting that on camera.
Huh?
I said thank you for having that on the broadcast.
Is it loud?
Yes.
Did anybody listen?
That was very lovely. Thank you for putting that on camera.
Huh?
I said thank you for having that on the broadcast.
Is it loud?
Yes.
Did anybody listen?
That was very lovely. Thank you for putting that on camera. I said thank you for having that on the broadcast.
Is it loud?
Yes. How did the Ottomans build and manage their empire? Okay, so the first question here is about the Ottomans, how they built it. They came out of they arose out of the fall of the Byzantines. The Turks were some of the main groups to topple them back in 1453. And they were the main, I guess, kind of new Sunni powered to rise, especially after the Mongols fell. The Ottomans, the Safavids, the Mughals are all very similar in that they were militarily based empires. Certainly, they used the gunpowder from China to help kind of rule. The big thing with them, especially the Ottomans, were probably the most successful of those three as far as expansion. And some of that just was because the success of the caliphates in Unit 3 was so grounded that the Ottomans could kind of play off of that same feel and being a religiously based empire. Get out of here. This is like serious. Please stop. Sorry. And so they were able to build from there. So hopefully that answers, and hopefully my wife is not going to bug the crap out of me anymore. And so hopefully that answers the second question there with similarities between the Safavids and the Ottomans. Although the Safavids, you guys all remember, hopefully, were Shia, not Sunni. And I'm trying my best to enable comments. You guys gotta work with me. I don't know what I'm doing here. Well, this is annoying. Why don't I have permission to? Yes, Price should be able to go back. It will save. I don't know why the comments is disabled. Please, I guess, don't use those. Either send me questions through Remind or send me questions through Twitter. I don't know why I can't get them up, or you can join the Hangout and ask questions through that feature. Sorry, I don't know why that's not working. Fred's asked, how are the three gunpowders different? Because they all seem the same. They are very similar. The big difference is the Ottomans certainly are the most successful of the three, and probably the most well-known. The Safavids in Persia were Shia instead of Sunni Muslim, which they still remain today, and were eventually kind of overtaken by the Ottomans and the Mughals. The Mughals had probably the most, or at least were the most religiously tolerant of the three, because they had to do a lot to incorporate all of these huge Hindu population in India. And so a lot of what their basis was, they brought in a lot of strong influences from the Hindu religion. Let's see. Enough. So let's see if we make this work. So next question, can you talk about the Mughals, please? I can. To be honest, there's not lots of stuff. I know there's a whole chapter with the gunpowder empires. It's not something you necessarily have to go into huge detail about all these three. A lot of what the test will focus on, not just Unit 4, but all of them. They're looking at similarities. They're looking at this time period after the Mongols fell, who filled that void in the Middle East and in India up until colonialism really begins, and the Europeans come in and really take over. The British especially come in, and obviously you get to next unit, they take over India, and they'll make massive changes to that area as well as in the rest of the Middle East. But there's not, I mean, there's just not lots and lots of stuff specifically you need to know about each individually of these three. Yeah, they're Muslim ruled. The Ottomans and Mughals especially ruled over pretty diverse areas. There are a lot of Christians in the Middle East and from the Byzantine era, Empire area still, and so that the Ottomans overtook. Lots of Hindus with the Mughals. You had certain strong leaders like Suleiman and with the Ottomans and Akbar with India, but not anything specifically outside of that. There's as far as Unit 4, I mean, the big thing is don't forget, obviously, coming to America, the slave trade, all the stuff going on in Europe with the Reformation, exploration, the beginnings of colonialism, etc. So I'm doing my best. I'm getting your questions here. What do we need to know about Abbas other than that he was a successful leader of the Safavid Empire? That's pretty much it. Yeah, there's really not much more and that you need to know about Shah Abbas other than he's the main ruler, and I can't tell you anything more about him. The Safavids are just kind of, I hate to say they're just kind of there, but they're just kind of there. Let's see, what are themes in Europe and the Americas at this time? That's from Lindsay. I don't know exactly what you mean with themes. Lots of change, obviously. The Columbian Exchange is the biggest thing that's going to affect the Americas and Europe. You have, excuse me, massive changes going on in the Americas with the arrival of Europeans. Smallpox killing off 90% of the population. All of the different foods now going from the Americas to the Old World. The animals going from the Old World to the New World. Spain and Portugal taking over the area, the rise in the silver trade, in the sugar trade, especially out of Brazil. Oh, apparently I've got a spammer or somebody who thinks they're funny on this. That's cool. My questions. And in Europe, there's also a lot of cultural change with the Reformation, which is going to lead to a lot of wars during this time between Catholics and Protestants. And so, again, let me see if I can get to, I know you guys got lots of questions. Can I talk about Western Europe? Yes, I can talk about Western Europe. I don't know if there's anything specifically, Abby, that you're looking for. But Western Europe, again, the Reformation, the wars between the Catholics and Protestants, like the 100 Years' War, are the big things. How Spain, Portugal lead the wave of exploration and colonialism, and they're followed by France, England, and Dutch will come later. The Portugal focus more on work in Africa and Asia. Spain certainly dominates the Americas. Know what mercantilism is and how the colonies would control every aspect of trade with their the area that they ruled over, and basically not allow free trade. So let's see, I'll try to get through these Remind ones, and then I got others. Let's see. What are the major defining points of Russian government? Just the fact that they're, for Harrison, the big thing with Russia is this is the time where they really explode and become an empire. That's the big thing, is Russia's going to grow out of really shambles after the Mongols took over. You're going to have strong leaders like Ivan, both the Ivans, Peter and Catherine, and they're going to come in and be able to try to do their best to catch Russia up to the rest of Europe. And you see that with the westernization policies of especially Peter and Catherine. It's a time dominated by serfdom. They do a lot of the work. They still rely on that, even though it's gone in most of the rest of Europe. But Russia is going to expand really, really quickly, going from small trading posts, what it was before the Mongols came in. And by the end of this era, they reach all the way to the Pacific under Catherine. It's one of the greatest kind of expansions like we've seen with the Mongols in a short time. but obviously with Russia, it's not all necessarily inhabitable land that they can do lots with, like Siberia. So hopefully that helps. And their rulers are known as czars. And we'll get more into that with the Romanov. Sorry, I'm hopefully watching Duklu, so that's why I keep looking over at the TV. Let's see. Emma asks, quick summary of Russia, which hopefully I just did. And how did the three gunpowder empires interact? Certainly conflicts between the Ottomans and Safavids because there were the two branches of Islam, with the Ottomans being Sunni and the Safavids being Shia. Eventually the Ottomans would start to take over some of their land later in the time period. But usually, I mean, for a lot of the time, they got along. I mean, they weren't allies that necessarily all ganged up and worked together to say fight off China or Russia or the Europeans when they came. It was one of those kind of, they're our neighbor and leave us alone, we'll leave you alone. Alexa asks, what do we need to know from before Christmas break? Everything going back to the Reformation, I think, will be on this. And exploration. Those are the two big ones that we talked about before, and obviously all the stuff with exploration, the discovery of America, the slave trade. That's big stuff there. Let's switch to this. So somebody asked, rapid fire, and I think this is my spammer, so I'll play their game. Did Bush do 9/11? No. Is Obama a reptile? No. Did the U.S. government create AIDS? No. And who killed JFK? Oswald. Thanks for whoever that was. Well done. Olivia asked, what were the main empires and what were their significance in Unit 4? It's split in two. You have the maritime empires of Spain and Portugal, who I've talked a lot about certainly already with colonization, exploration and colonization in the Americas. England or Britain, France, and the Netherlands are the other big three maritime empires. The Dutch will do a lot in Indonesia. Britain will come over and get involved in North America, same with France. And both Britain and France will also start to make headway into Africa and South Asia, especially Britain. The land empires in Asia are Russia, China, the Ottomans, Safavids, and Mughals. Not to be, I guess, Eurocentric and say that the European ones matter more, but certainly they're going to have a little bit more of an impact, opening up the new world, and how they interact and take over some of those empires in Asia. So I guess that's their significance. Answer that. Bryson, what are the similarities and differences between slavery, encomienda, and mita? The mita, I'll start, I guess, in order that they happen. The mita system was done by the Incas, and basically it was, they set up, everyone had to work for the state, and it's almost kind of like indentured servitude that hopefully you learned a little bit with U.S. history, because that was a big thing when it was discovered. Where basically, you had a amount of work to do that the state determined, and once you'd done that, you were kind of free to go on. A lot of times with the Incas, this were conquered peoples, but it's a form of coerced or forced labor. Encomiendas were when the Spanish first came over and tried to get the natives to work. Obviously, it has varying degrees of success because the natives mostly died because of smallpox, and also because the natives knew the land a little bit better, and so they could escape. But again, they just weren't used to the work and everything, so those didn't work. Slave system that we've talked about, obviously you're importing slaves from Africa to specifically work on the plantations and the large estates, and so that was very different and something new. Thank you. Getting photobombed by my dog, sorry. So hopefully that answers that question there. I got one here. I know that Japan limited connection with the East, but did any other area do this as well? Fred asked, and yes, China started to do this as well. As Britain and everybody came in, they were ones who had gone through and kind of got tired of all the missionaries coming in and kind of could see what Britain was doing and tried to push them out as best they could. Unfortunately, it didn't really work, or it works for a very short time period because unlike Japan, China is a lot more easily accessible. And so they weren't able to do that. So let's see. Next question. Can I talk about social structures and different empires at this time? From Aaron Bear. Gosh, where to begin? Most places have slavery, and so they're usually at the bottom. When we're talking social issues, I guess the patriarchy is still kind of alive and well. You don't see a whole lot of important roles and whatnot for women. You have a very wealthy kind of nobility class in a lot of these places, and so they'll be able to make a lot of the decisions, certainly push the kings and queens, and or at least make it feel that the kings and queens have to cater to them. The merchants and artisans and traders continue to work their way up and become kind of this elite, wealthy class. But that's, I guess that's kind of it. There's not anything really specific. The big stuff's slavery, obviously, during this time period. Let's see. Is there anything specific we need to know about the Ottomans and Constantinople beyond that they captured it? From Audrey. No, that's it. That they were the ones who sacked Constantinople, and that the Ottomans really kind of, or the Turks really were the ones that rose out of Baghdad after the Mongols left too. And thank you again, whoever has decided to name themselves Taylor Swift. You have some awesome questions, but I'm not going to answer any more of them. Oh, Duke lost. Haha, you Duke fans. What do we need to know about Russia? I kind of went through that earlier, so not to dismiss your question, but you can go back through and watch this. It saves on YouTube, so you can go back through. But again, the big stuff with Russia, it's the emergence of an empire. Russia is going to become a major player in Europe. And this is the time where they kind of grow from nothing to at least starting to move into that big time player that we'll see them in Unit 5 and especially in Unit 6. What do we need to know about commercial and scientific revolutions? Not tons about the commercial revolution. The bigger thing is the scientific revolution. And that's certainly a lot about using reason, and kind of this grew out of the Renaissance and used that approach that a lot of people are doing just to question everything. People are now using this to go through with science, and this is the time of Bacon and Descartes with the scientific method, Galileo, Copernicus. So there's some key people during this time period. I think it gets covered a little bit in the next Unit 2 with Enlightenment. But certainly, I guess it's a very revolutionary new way of thinking. It's going to have a major impact on culture. And a lot of it goes through, and it talks about the further kind of question of the Catholic Church. And you're going to see its power kind of diminish as well, as more and more people are going to look to science and reason rather to explain the unexplainable. So hopefully that answers your question there. I guess go to some major events or accomplishments in the Ming Dynasty. What did Zheng He do? From Amy. Zheng He is the Chinese explorer that went out and did these voyages for the Chinese government to bring back tribute from across the Indian Ocean area, from Africa, from South Asia. what did the Ming do other than sponsor? They start to sponsor his travels, and then they cut it off because they put their money and resources to more national defense, which was more important to them, certainly. So they covered that more, building up the Great Wall, restoring the scholar gentry, and a lot more stuff. Getting back kind of the Confucian ideals and principles into China that the Mongols had taken away. That was really the main thing the Ming did. There wasn't a whole lot that, with them or the Qing dynasties, that I hate to say they're just more dynasties to know in China, but they're not anything different. You just need to know that they're the ones that really restored China back to what it was before the Mongols came, which we saw in the Tang and Song dynasties during their golden age. Let's see. How the gunpowder empires impacted the world economy. Well, the big thing, I guess, with the Ottomans and the world economy is the Ottomans taking over the Middle East. There was a big thing to separate, or I should say spur on exploration, because people in Europe didn't want to pay or deal with the Ottomans or the Turks to kind of go through and continue on the old Silk Road passages. And so it kind of led some to go through and find new means to get to Asia, to still get the goods that they wanted. And so you had a lot of them. You know, it's what spurred on Portugal and Da Gama going around the Cape of Good Horn. It's this influenced Columbus to look and sail across the Atlantic, and furthered on there. What did those empires really have? I mean, a lot of raw materials in those areas, but nothing too big. So, significance of the Jesuits from Will. The Jesuits are it's a group that came up with the, let's see, I answered that question about the Ottoman economy. The Jesuits were part of the Catholic Counter-Reformation. They're a group that tried to restore kind of Catholic order after so many people were moving away. And the Jesuits were some of the big ones to go. Sorry, my dog's an idiot. The Jesuits were some of the main ones to do missionary work in Asia, and go through trying to spread Christianity, and especially China and Japan, to the point that both countries pretty much said, we're good, we don't need Christianity here anymore. And so they were subsequently banned, and part of that really kind of led to some of the isolation policies that they put in, especially Japan. Let's see. Key points about the Mughals: militaristic, a lot of blending between Islam and Hinduism. One of our syncretic religions came up during this time period with the Mughals, which was Sikhism. And don't forget about that, or Buddhism, which we've learned about. What else? Akbar is the big leader that you need to know. Eventually, they're going to be taken over by the British Empire. And more you're going to see Europeans come to India and push in for trade and whatnot. I'm glad some of you like my dog, and no, I won't give the 300 like one of you asked. But that's really it with the Mughals. Again, a lot of significance, or sorry, you can see I can't multitask. A lot of toleration between Islam and Hinduism, because you just had so much of that religion still in the area that certainly had an effect. The caste system remains in India during this time period for the most part. And so that's another important thing to remember. Let's see, back to the questions on here. What do we need to know about Japan besides the fact that they were isolated? They end feudalism. So you see the shogun and samurai kind of culture go away, along with the daimyo. And that's kind of happens through the rise of the two guys we had on our global summit, Tokugawa and Hideyoshi. And really, there's not probably a whole lot you need to know. Japan will start to trade, but isolation wasn't just one way. They also kept their own people from leaving Japan and going to other places. So it wasn't just that they kept everybody out. They also didn't want their own people to leave. And Japan's going to stay isolated and kind of on their own all the way up till the 1850s, when Matthew Perry from the United States sails across and basically forces them to open up their ports to trade. So that was your question, Abby. Is it important to know what each empire traded from Aaron through Remind? No, I mean, the big stuff, certainly make sure you know. Like with the Columbian Exchange, and I mean, obviously the big thing silk comes from China and East Asia. Spices are going to be a big thing. Silver trade is going to be important out of the Americas. Sugar from Brazil. But no, you don't need to go through and know every little thing that Spain traded or that any of the gunpowder empires traded. That's not important. What do we need to know about the Devshirme? The primary source that you guys looked at with the Ottoman Empire, dealing with some of its how it viewed religious toleration and how it tried to do a little bit with relations between, in this case, the Muslims and Christians in the Ottoman Empire. That is important. So please make sure you go back through the Devshirme document that's linked on the website. I know there was a question on the quiz. I'm sure there's going to be a question on the test about that too. Or if there wasn't one on the quiz, it'll be on the test. But that's a very important document from that time period, and so make sure that you know that. Taylor Swift continues to be hilarious. Would you say the test focuses more on maritime empires or land empires, or an even mix for studying purposes? Probably more the maritime, just because the maritime empires had a big impact with the slave trade, with Americas, the Columbian Exchange, and don't forget there is, I mean, exploration and the Reformation are big parts of this unit too, and that obviously impacted Europe a lot more than the rest of the world. So there'll be some on the land empires, but not tons. It's not certainly a 50-50 split. No idea what this question's about, so I'm going to ignore it because it deals with out of this time period and Genghis Khan and all that. And Taylor Swift's going to get banned, whoever you are. I guess that's the joys of being public. Are there going to be any questions on the coffee house reading? No, probably not. I mean, the big thing to remember with that, Kathy, is that Europe, this is a time where you have a lot of people sitting down and discussing its influence from the Renaissance, this new ideas and thoughts and theories. You know, as I said, people are beginning to look to things other than just the word of the church as being the be all and end all. And so that's really what that coffee house is, and that whole social networking article was about reading. That's the main thing to remember. I don't think there's anything specific out of that other than kind of the general premise that that's where these great thinkers and minds were meeting, were in these places. Do you need to know about early modern Korea, Annika? Not unless you want to. It's not going to be on the test. Oh, my dog's annoying. I've got some hilarious people. Stella, go away. What were gender roles like in the Ottoman Empire? Same as everywhere else for the most part. Men had free will to kind of do what they want. They're wives, mothers, daughters were fairly restricted. Why do I hate my? I don't hate my dog. I just it's in the way. Thanks for asking, though, Taylor Swift. That was awesome. All right, so I think I've eliminated all the non-serious questions. So let's see. Anything else? Since right now all I'm getting are spam. Why are they called the Gunpowder Empires? Not heard about them once this unit. Oh, that's what the Ottoman, Safavid, and Mughal empires are kind of known as. All three, for the most part, kind of came out of the fall of the Mongols in that area. One of the main ways that these specific groups were able to take powers because they had access to guns and weapons of that caliber. That's really all. It's just a cute nickname that we gave them, Fred. But not anything, I guess, different. Let's see. This unit more about European. Answer that a little bit. Could I talk about the Qing, please? Sure, the Qing dynasty follows the Ming dynasty, and there's not a whole lot that you need to know beyond that. They will be more important in Unit 5 when we start talking about imperialism in China and having to deal with that, but there's not a whole lot for Unit 4 to know other than that they follow the Ming dynasty here. I know I'm skipping some of your stuff, so I apologize if I'm not getting to it as you would like. I just answered that question. Could I do a unit breakdown like you do in the review sessions at school, just something to give us some notes to study? The review guide is up on the webpage. If you go to resources, I think it's that main page. You go to the bottom, it goes and gives kind of a chapter by chapter. Here's what you need to know. To be honest, I wasn't able to steal a copy of Stern, so I don't have some of that breakdown stuff with me or at my disposal. And so I'm trying to do this as best I can off of memory. So yeah, sorry, I can't probably do that spice breakdown as best, or at least probably as you guys would like. The big kind of 5 key things are on the website too, on that unit page, so please use those resources. Another question about the Dev Shirmi. I kind of said that. What did Abbas do that was so great? Nothing really. We just like giving people names of great. And, so I don't have anything specific for what Shah Abbas did, other than at the height of the Safavid Empire, he was their leader. Could I elaborate on Babur? He and Akbar are probably 2 of the more well-known Mughal emperors. Fought off probably more resistance from China and the Ottomans and some of them, but nothing big. I mean, really with the Mughals, I think the big things are to remember are, as I said, religious toleration. And that's a big deal because it's just one of those questions, because that's what somebody asked, is why is it important that the Mughals stress religious toleration? They had to, because you had such a strong and dominant Hindu and Buddhist cultures in that region. But also it's important. It's one of those questions they just like to ask a lot is, wow. They like to go through and ask those kind of questions about, culture and those kinds of things. So I think I need to find a way to ban a couple people here. So, but elaborating on Babur, I mean, no, you don't need to know anything specifically about what he did. So, sorry. What was the Safavid economy like? Same as the others. I mean, did enough to get by, but nothing. Really, economically, we're not too worried about the gunpowder empires. A lot of what we focus on is how they were politically. Who resisted the Ottomans? Certainly the Europeans did. The Ottomans tried to expand into Eastern Europe, which obviously the Eastern Europeans didn't really like. And so you have that, the Battle of Lepanto, which was a big one that kind of stopped their movement forward. And so that was a big kind of group. The Eastern Europeans were the main ones who resisted the Ottomans. So hopefully that answered your question there, Jesse. There's got to be a way. That I can block people. So let's see. And again, if one of you is either Nate Higgers or Taylor Swift, you are hilarious. All right, answer that. That. What do we need to know about the maritime empires? Their influence on colonizing around the world is probably the biggest part that you need to know about them, Mercedes. Certainly their influences in, or their role in the transatlantic slave trade, the conquistadors, and taking over the Americas, and just setting up all of the trade posts and charter companies that either Spain and Portugal did the trade forts and posts. The charter companies were more British, French, and Dutch. Again, important things just to set up little pockets around the world that they could get raw materials for, since most of the maritime empire countries are very small compared to some of these places that they were taking over. And so this gave them resources that they didn't have, which they then were able to turn into manufactured goods and then sell them back to places all across the world. We saw this most probably well documented with the transatlantic trade, where they would take raw materials from the Americas, manufacture the goods back in Europe, weapons, clothing, other things like that, go to Africa, sell them to the African kingdoms, trade them for slaves. They would take the slaves across the Atlantic back to the Americas. The slaves would then work, grow more stuff. The materials went back across to England, Spain, and Portugal, and the cycle continued. And so that was the big thing we see, certainly with the Maritimes are responsible for that. Was there any group that gave noticeably more social equality to women at this time? Not that I can think of, Will. I'm sure there's some in Europe that are probably further along than some of the Asian or cultures. Certainly anybody that's still kind of being much more tribalistic. Some of the African kingdoms that weren't Muslim may still, because they carry on some of those very tribalistic and almost hunter-gatherer type qualities to their civilizations. But they're probably, it's much fewer or rare to see anybody give equal rights at this time. That still is not going to happen yet till you really get through the Enlightenment, which is more Unit 5. How did the gunpowers fall and lose power? Mostly was due to Europeans coming. And once Europeans came in, they had better weapons, the gunships and everything else. Their technology at this point, Europe surpasses Asia, especially the Middle East and South Asia. And so they were able to come in like they did with Africa and other places, gain allies within the area. And, sorry, I got dogs.
Who is it? We didn't order anything. What number are you looking? Who are you
Hold
looking
on.
for?